Hey guys, Mustached here to review the series Alice in Borderland. Now, I had not reviewed it at the end of Season 2, with the sneaking suspicion that there would be, in fact, a Season 3, and lo and behold, that was actually met not too long ago. I had actually just finished up Season 3. With that being said, well, now I can review all of it, since I didn't review any of it last time. So, with that, let's get into it as objectively as possible. So the show follows Arisu. That's Alice in Japanese, for those unfamiliar, but it's the guy on the right there. He'll later on meet Usagi, the lady on the left, with the pink dress, or shirt. So, what we learn off the bat is that the main character, Arisu, is quite the gamer. But he doesn't have a job outside of that. He's simply just a gamer. He's not even a Let's Player by choice, or by working at it. So this probably came out before, or unbeknownst to the manga conceptualization of the Let's Player, so that probably never occurred to the character, and so that is translated to the show. He's just simply a gamer who doesn't have a job. Outside of that, he has his two friends. You can see at least one of them on the poster there, the one on the furthest left. These two pull Arisu away to just do some hijinks and just chill outside and whatever. So, during one of their outings in Shibuya, we get a weird set of happenstance that happen all at the same time, or pretty close to one another. First, fireworks during the daytime, or midday. Next, when Arisu was being held up, and, they thought they were in trouble because they caused quite a little bit of a car incident. The car incident does portray something a lot later on, but for now, we don't know what it is other than they managed to get to the other side. But even after that, when they got and hid inside a bathroom stall, the lights and power went off, and subsequently, the sound drowned out dramatically into nothingness. And once they exited the stall, they seemed to enter or appear in a place that seemed identical to the place they were just in, but no one else was. Everyone else seemed gone. It is discovered through most of the show that they are not in the same place that they were before, but I'm sort of fast-tracking that aspect of it. In this world, the Borderland, as it is named later on, significantly so, it is a set of games that each person must play. And I say must because if they just wait around and do nothing, they will simply be lasered to death. So they must complete at one point or another. That much is certain. So Arisu and friends nonchalantly head toward their first game. They're joined by two ladies, one that will become later on important, a little bit more so, and a lady used to help progress our understanding of this world. So they enter their first game called Life or Death. In this game, they are presented two doors, a life door and a death door. The lady quickly, or at some point within the game starting, chooses the life door. She is promptly zapped to death, meaning that the name of the door isn't the obvious answer. It's a bit more convoluted than that, unfortunately. However, once that occurs, obviously they are, at least for this, the 4 remaining competitors can safely move to the other door. In doing so, they are once presented again with the same choice in the next room over, but with less time, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, one of them is injured in this game. That being the one in the green shirt that you can see on the poster there. But they help the lady escape, so she kind of joins in on their group for the time being. Meanwhile, in the second game, I forget the name of it, but it's like a defuse the bomb sort of deal. And so, this is where we meet another interesting player in Chisu. The white-haired individual with a very calm and almost cold personality. However, it is due to Arisu and Usagi later on, who he meets here, that he is able to complete the game. More specifically, her actions that lead her to the opposite side of where the stopping the bomb portion actually is hidden. So that's how they are able to clear the game and move on to the next. However, the two split their ways for the time being. This was only a merger at convenience at the time, but would later grow to be significantly more. So for Arisu, he rejoins his friends and the lady for a next game. And this game really drives home the point. They were told in this the defuse the bomb game style game that each shoot of card has a purpose. The cards also signify how long you can take off. The higher the card value, so in this case the first one was like a 3 or 4 or something along those lines, so they got 3 or 4 days of being able to relax before heading into another game. So more days off, but the higher values also mean harder to complete in general. So they end up in their next game in the 7 of Hearts. Fairly difficult of a game, all things considered. Though, compared to the 10 of Hearts game, we'll get to that in a bit. So, we learn later on this game was tailor-made for Arisu and his buddies, and the lady who accompanied them in this scenario. So with the 4 of them in tow, they are going to play a game of hide and seek. Due to how the rules are laid out, it is the wolf that must hide from the sheep. The wolf will survive, and there is only one wolf at the start of the game. This demonstrates the heart, how quickly their friendships snap. The time that they were given was pretty generous, all things considered. I believe it was like an hour and change of time's worth to be able to hide. That is a suspiciously long time for a simple game of hide and seek. But then again, maybe not. Who knows, right? Maybe I'm just not too remembering on how long these typical games can last in real life. But I digress. It quickly snaps into the friends frenzying over each other. And in this instance, Arisu, where he was able to show off that he is quite intelligent, which is one of his better qualities as a player here, but he is not perfect. He is unable to come up with a strategy that can help all of them. And is due to this and the separation and a flip that occurs within the same vein, that Arisu ends up being the only one to survive that game. He ends up with the wolf, and the others actually end up hiding from him. So, yeah. If given enough time, he suspects that there could have been a solution that could have gotten them all free. Now, what's beautiful about this is that there has already been plenty of video, or quite a few at least, of videos speculating on the very situation of how they could have gotten out, or if there was a way out that could have gotten everybody out alive. And to me, that speaks of the volume and success of the game and how it's set up. It is set up with these tools that are sneakingly suspicious. That is one thing. Another thing that we aren't told, at least for this game, is that there is no rule about, because they have these collars and glasses on, about removing the collars and glasses. That, to me, is vital information. However, why Arisu stopped is timing and positioning of the episodes. Remember, he had just witnessed when the other players lost in the hide-and-seek game, or the defused bomb game, as I'd call it. The losers, the taggers, were the ones who had a very similar neck color that exploded. Unfortunately, that memory is the thing that he plays while trying to remove his own, that prevents him from taking that risk. It's the thing that is messing with his heart. That idea, that concept, that thing that he just witnessed. Now, the reason I'm actually also going to argue that I think that is perhaps the way to beat this game is that it's not the only game that utilizes this unique strategy. So I'm going to cut or jump to a game significantly later, that being, I believe it's the Jack of Spades game? No, the Jack of Clubs game, excuse me, because that's the teamwork group game. Here, they're given wristbands. And there's no rule against taking off the wristbands. In fact, one of the players, named Tata, I believe it is, takes his off after earning a buttload of points and gives it to Arisu. And since he's holding on to both point-related things, his combination of things, of points from the additional color are added to his, as if he were tagging somebody without actually tagging them. This is also in the game, the Joker-related one, even later on, because Isugi is pregnant, so she's given an additional band for the baby. Much like that, the band isn't even on a person, but again, counts when it's left in a room alone. It's what allows them to help out a person that gets trapped in a isolated room. So again, there are more instances where removing the color during the game, when the removing the color isn't a rule, seems to be something you can do. So that really lends itself to being a real potential for a solution, considering the color is the thing that is explicitly going to kill you if you run out of time, or if you're the sheep at the end of the game. But again, Arisu was stricken with that fear, so he couldn't bring himself to think that that could have been a proper solution. And I'm actually really glad that that's the case. Again, I'm glad that the character is posed as an intelligent character, but isn't posed as being an perfect intelligent character. It shows that the writing is actually being really clever about when to make Arisu explicitly smart and when to draw his emotion above his intelligence. After all, the game, again, prior, dealt with, well, that, again, seeing something that viscerally gave him the emotional, fear that something bad would occur. And it led to a worse outcome. And so, each game subsequent to that, or after that, rather, the Arisu is rejoined by Usagi, he wanting to pretty much kill himself at the idea that he was the one chosen. However, it is through her consistency in wanting to see him through that he eventually decides to join in. They play a few other games, including a bus game where the bus itself is the goal. So definitely mind-fucking opponents that decide to run at it for it at the beginning of it, and so on and so forth. Now back to the Ten of Hearts game that I mentioned earlier. Here, once again, just like the Seven of Hearts, is an emotional, sequence. This time, however, Arisu and Usagi have found this beach area where a large swath of players have congregated under one person, that being a character named Hatter, because of course you gotta have a lot more Alice references in this story. So of course there was a Hatter character. So the Hatter suggests that once they collect all the cards that the game will end. He was surprisingly correct about that end scenario. He just assumed that it would only be one person returning, despite the game, we would later on discover, ask everybody what they want to do. Either stay in the Borderland and become citizens there, or return home. Which is the penultimate, or season finale of Season 1. Or, sorry, Season 2. Sorry, excuse me. So, at the end of Season 1, it's all about clearing the Ten of Hearts game, the final card that is not a face card to be dealt with. So, the game is Find the Witch. There is a dead person already on the floor, and there is a claimed witch within the context of the room. Arisu, mind you, has been tied up due to his snooping around and trying to get the cards, with Chaisu kind of tricking him a little bit there. But I digress. So, it quickly turns on its head. The witch is thrown around, accusations are thrown around, and soon enough, the militant group within this area, the beach, start to just slaughter everybody, and slowly but surely trying to get their bodies to the fire, which is part of the game. The fire must be utilized, meant to be for the witch. The conclusion is reached by Arisu, who eventually gets found by the others, including Usagi. He eventually comes to the conclusion that the witch is the dead body at the beginning of the game. They must explicitly told him the rules word for word, and told him the hint of, the stuff that... Because it mentions how the answer is right in front of you, as the announcer implies. That is correct. The answer was in front of all of them at once. in that one sequence, in fact. Well, with the exception of Arisu at the time. So, again, that game was seemingly more about paying attention and also equally about staying calm and, the militant aspect of it definitely immediately threw that out of the window, though. But Arisu is able to regain the composure of everybody, but does suffer some beatdown along the way of getting to that, that moment. But they are able to clear the game after the fact, and it is only after that that they reveal the location and the face cards are indeed revealed for the prospect of Season 2. And again, Season 2 is explicitly about all the face cards being dealt with. Now, much like Season 1, Season 2, again, only has 8 episodes, and obviously there are slightly more face cards than 8. So obviously you can only focus in on a handful of them. And obviously the last one must be, because of the naming convention of Alice, the Queen of Hearts. Because of course that has to be the last one that they go to solve. This season is quite intrepidatious, as it were. First, when they are all trying to collectivize in the opening, the King of Spades immediately starts firing upon people. No rules even established on this one. It is just manhunt, essentially. Well, any given rules, again, to the players. They are just explicitly hunted down. Perhaps they felt like a lot more people were actually clearing the games than what they were expecting, so they had somebody, in this case the King of Spades, ready in the wing to help dwindle that number down significantly so. However, there is one thing. If the players can get out of their scenario and enter another game, the King of Spades cannot interfere with that game, seemingly being the conclusion that they reach. So they do so, thinking that dealing with this right now is not great. That's what leads them to the club game that I just mentioned. And from there, we have smaller pockets of teams doing other games as well. Perhaps one of the most compelling among them is the tag game up in this big tower area. This is at the point where Usagi finds this young boy. The boy's visa is nearly running out, and so he's brought there along with this group, but he is made the king of the group, of the blue group, which this is where she reunites with Arisu. Now the red team starts out smaller than the blue team initially. However, due to their quick pacing and parkour skills, the red team quickly catches up, and not only that, due to some wording and persuasion, a lot more people end up picking red over blue, leaving just Arisu, Usagi, and the boy, a trio of people, over the bigger group. But it is clear that in order to win, it's not purely, again, just about the face card. It wasn't purely about just being athletic. It was also about, it kind of had a mix of being a heart game in a way. It was about persuading people back to your side. That's what, the uphill battle actually was. And it is through utilizing the desperate need to get back to their world is what eventually drove at least an additional red player to give himself up freely. And due to their location, they were in like the hub where the red team were. Uh, I guess their their discussion carried out loud enough for enough of the other players to also hear this speech, as it were. But the groups bigly to conglomerate in one area, and the Queen of Spades' flaw is that she desperately wanted Arisu. After all, even after gaining all the allies that she had gained, she wasn't satisfied with that enough. She wanted to gain another ally in Arisu. However, he wasn't having it. In fact, the swipe and change in dialogue of their speech was so moving, and due to their planning and positioning now at this point, they are able to re-tag everyone with the exception of her back on their side. Yes, everyone. She is the only one who loses this game. And it seems like the face cards are interesting characters in their own right. Each one seems to really surprise Arisu and even Usagi respectively at this game, because those two had a rivalry. But it is very much the journey of seeing who these people were, like even the Jack of Spades, as I was mentioning, the nudist character. It was his first appealing strategy of doling out his points evenly that surprised Arisu. Here is very much another surprise of what these characters are saying before they die. For him, it was very much about living freely and being equal friends with his friends, though that ended up also kind of being a weakness, in a sense. See, his strategy was his immediate downfall, because maybe he wasn't as true to his word as he figured he might have been. He, during his game, has all of his allies, including himself, run toward the pole, all at the same time, and one of them gets tagged in the process. So he was willing to risk himself, though, equally as much. But despite that, he still sacrificed one of his allies. This is what gave him the upper hand at that juncture of the game, though. And from there, again, re-flipping it, due to, again, Arisu getting the additional ban, utilizes the one less speech card, or the one less handshake card. He gets it. But it never that's the thing, these games never come at a sense of malice from these individuals. At least most of them. Maybe with the exception of the Heart game later on. That one seems like it's meant to be the character being sneaking, or at least attempting to be so. And every other character with that being the exception, seems to really shift the dynamic of Arisu's thinking of what this all is. That they are all two people at the end of the day, end all be all. Strip all of the way, you're still with people. And that perhaps is no more exempt than in the Final Heart game, or more pronounced, rather. She tries her best, and this is the most bizarre game out of all of them. A game of croquet, 3 rounds. That sounds like the most baffling one, considering it's a heart game. However, utilizing her ability of persuasion, things take a weird shift in this moment where we see when, they play the first 2 rounds normally, and it is during the 3rd round where she offers tea and begins offering a potential explanation for all of this, where things start to get out of control. It is here where she positions herself as somebody of authority who does know everything, but offers up these crazy, worlds and future aliens, the theorizing. She utilizes all of it. And again, it is through her active persuasion, and we get these nice visual moments of, as she's talking, we see Arisu and Usagi in the 3D, landscape and virtual reality and stuff like this. And even later on, where she claims to be his doctor and a therapist, more importantly. And this is the moment where the beginning of the show is recontextualized for all of us. We see that the allies, his friends, got hit by one of the cars instead at this time. And that he alone, buried that in a sense of creating this world and all of it, which seems to freak him out to the extent of being able to do nothing. And again, we get that visualization of him in an attire of somebody being nursed for. Usagi also ends up in that position as well for a bit there. And it is clear that her words are crumbling away too, though. At a point, she does mention that this is still part of the game. And in fact, all he needs to do is give up. And later, or earlier than that, due to some wordage, he lifts a gun to her. Guns were perfectly, or any weapon was perfectly allowed in this game. Explicitly so. However, the parameters of the game explicitly state that the game must be completed in this scenario. So, upon her death, the game can't be completed. It is impossible to complete without her. And so, causes the true dilemma. She can just stall for time as much as she wanted to. And that's pretty much her entire strategy here, is stalling for time. And she's really effective at it, it would appear. And her second strategy is to try to get Usagi to give up on the game entirely. Again, when the killing her part doesn't work. So that's her second attempt. But Usagi is able to keep pushing back on the boundaries that he has reclosed himself off to. He has sort of cycled back into that place where he was at the Seven of Hearts game of, I lost my friends and I don't deserve to be here anymore. He cycled all the way back there, and it is only through her that he's able to pull himself back out of it once more. And so, seeing this movement and the second illusion, as it were, fades away, and it's still the game that they were initially in, she sighs and say, "Alright, let's play." And they finish off their game, which does take a while, but it does end at into the nighttime. And so, as I mentioned, they were given a choice to stay or go. Obviously, Arisu and Usagi and a few others choose to leave. However, two individuals decide to stay, who will be more equivalent in Season 3. But how do we even get a Season 3? You see, we get a repackaging of what really happened in Shibuya. So now we start to see the wider scope. The scope camera is panned out, and we're not just following Arisu. We see the other players moving about Shibuya too now this time around. And the fireworks were actually, as we discover, a meteor that hit Shibuya. The meteor caused the death and destruction, and those who were unconscious entered the Borderland. And furthermore, once in the Borderland, despite their being there for what felt like days, they are only unconscious for like a minute or so. So the illusion of time is definitely at play here. But once Arisu sees they're in the living world, Usagi, they hook up there in Season 2. And in Season 3, they are obviously a further along couple. So there that is. And again, one of the bigger reasons why we knew we were getting a Season 3 was a Joker card. It was the one card left off on a table to signify that that is a card that they didn't even consider being a part of the deck. And indeed, it was. So joke's on them already. And the games haven't even begun yet, but Season 3 opens up with them back in the real world. And they eventually pull in Usagi first through some type of drug or something or other. And this is primarily driven by this guy who is obsessed with finding what the Borderland is, or if it exists, or all of that, what this whole death experience even is. And this also brings him into that world as well. And it is due to this sequence of Usagi being whisked away back into that world, Arisu is compelled to do the same to find her and pull her back out a second time. And indeed, they spent a lot of their time this time around separate from one another. The first game being this questionnaire type game, and for each wrong answer, an arrow is shot by the amount it is off by. So if the answer is off by 2, then 2 arrows are shot. And with each question, the potential for the number to be bigger does so indeed get bigger. So the threat escalates regardless of how long they think they have. So this game requires them to read even a bit more carefully, and Arisu puts that together by reading the directions of the safe place to be during the guessing part. But there is a further strategy that I had thought of, again, and I think that's the brilliant writing of this game, is pick a smaller group of people. There is a large number of people in this game. Pick a small number of them, like let's say 3 to 5, like really small group among them, and determine that they are last. And have the last group that's going to be picking out from, the thing to start looking for an exit right off the beginning of the game. This could have helped them significantly so. And, in fact, another part of that strategy is to purposely, because each question has a time limit of, how quickly you can answer, to waste as much time as conceivably possible not answering the question. Now, of course, by not answering the question, you're off by the totality of the number of the solution. So you do want to give an answer, regardless. You just kind of want to ballpark it and be as close as conceivably possible. Otherwise, you're going to get a slew of arrows. And unfortunately, the group is consistently wrong throughout the game. It appeared that they did not have the luck of having a mathematician in their group. And the final question is, and of course, with it being the final question, so of course Arisu pulls it, is what is the population of the planet Earth? And that is in the billions, So that is that many arrows. Billions of arrows. So they are going to die if they stay where they are. No doubt about it. But the first card, or slip of paper rather, had given them their biggest hint. Not so surprisingly with this type of game. It said that something along the lines of east or whatever, some direction is your safe direction or something along those lines. So that's the direction where they end up finding a secret passage, which helps them clear the game from, once answering the question, like I said, a billion so on arrows slowing down on the group. And of course, with every wrong question, some people get it wrong and instantly die. It is clear after the first round that the following people playing should have been playing a lot more cautiously instead of just standing around. As the show does, they should have been paying more attention to not only the clues, but more so in just trying to position themselves in a place of safety just in case. Another solution, at least early on, would have been to, since there are only 3 arrows at the beginning, is smother out the fire quickly. That can only help you so long, though, because the number, again, exponentially gets bigger and bigger each round. So that's not gonna be a big solution moving forward, but it probably would have helped in the first or second round, whenever that question came up. But couldn't have helped them forever, as obvious by the last question being in the billions. But again, it is that fear in that sort of, these things that sort of compile on the players that definitely sink them into thinking that they need to play in a certain way. And Arisu is not remembering things from the previous seasons yet. He's regaining those memories as after the game is already, finalizing. I do think that bit is a little bit of a cheat in terms of the writing. I think that is the weakest part of season 3 is its opening in that regard, in having Arisu and most of the other players not remember anything from the world, the Borderland world. Again, I feel like that is a bit of a cheat in regards, because, right, in the real world, you'd be thinking about, like, what you saw, so how would they forget if they ended up back there, right? That doesn't seem to follow. So I do think that season 3 does have the weakest writing in terms of all 3 seasons. That is, make no mistake about that. And we get some more games where we get this train one where we mainly follow Isugi for this one, but we also see at the end of the game we see Arisu and his group. They had been split off. But while they were still split off, we see them also play another game together, but again, just split off from one another. This was a zombie card game called Zombie Hunt. I believe it's 4 zombie cards are initially passed off randomly among each group. So too, at least it's claimed, that there are randomly assorted amount of vaccine cards, and everybody is given 1 use of a shotgun card. The problem, or problems, plural, is, well, as the games follow, of course, presentation of game, how the rules are set up, the personalities of the players, not, thinking that they must play it one way when they could play it another. All these factors are, dial up on one another. And inevitably, it leads to people dying. And it does operate as a game where everybody could have survived, which is interesting. It plays almost like a heart game, despite all these particular games being Joker games. So this is the closest it gets to a heart type game anyway, I think, of the games. But I digress in saying that I think that this is the highlight of the season in terms of seeing how things would pan out. It turns out that Arisu, not so surprisingly, was one of the zombies. Now, again, what's so fascinating to me, more so than that, is that we never see, once played in the entire sequence, a vaccine card. Not once. Which tells me 1 or 2 things. 1, there was only ever 1 vaccine card and it never got utilized. Or 2, there never actually was a vaccine card, which would be the higher doubted outcome to get to. But of course, with the game it being called Zombie Hunt, Arisu's strategy of the offset is what actually wins him the game. You see, when zombies come forth, they are kept alive for a number of rounds, and that was, for the remaining humans, their biggest mistake. In terms of, in thinking that it's a life and death game and that, not everyone can win. If that is your mindset as a player, then the humans were at a disadvantage on the offset. that was a terrible way of thinking if the strategy wasn't to keep everyone alive, which for someone like Arisu, it is, or it leans to try to save as many people as possible. So with him as a zombie, this strategy makes perfect sense. Make the zombie stay alive. And with everyone only having one shotgun card, it also makes a whole lot of sense. After all, you would want to get the source of the person who spread the first zombie card in the first place, not the person it spread to necessarily. But since the zombie who got spread stays alive, it counts towards the zombie team totality, and that number is getting exponentially bigger each round with each, unless they come forward and initiate who had zombified them. That is the only time where the shotgun cards finally come into use. Now, if a shotgun card is used on a human, it does not work. This is given to us later on in the game, where we meet a new blue-haired girl whose name I don't recall, who is also quite the strategist in her own right. Kind of a new Chiasu, mayhaps, but I digress in saying that she comes up with a very clever strategy of her own right, one that almost seems to prioritize the humans. So his direct competition in this sense, Arisu's. She claims that she holds both a zombie card and a medicine or vaccine card. When in doubt, when we see her hand, she holds neither. But because of the way she presented so confidently, it was believed. After all, like I said, this feels very much like a heart game in that there is like this idea of deception. And again, Arisu was playing his part in that as well, but on the other side. So he eventually switches her at a point to a zombie after her game with a person with a shotgun tried to use it on her, and failed obviously because she was human. So that guy's card was up, and then after she was turned into a zombie. So that guy dies at the end with a handful of other humans that are left, because the zombies at this juncture, with the amount of rounds that had been given, the zombies well overpopulate the humans, because of course they did, due to this type of strategy at the onset of the game. So there's that. And now, the final game. And what makes the final game so fascinating to me is that it's not actually that much different than the very first game Arisu played. It is a set of, they're in the middle of the room this time, instead of entering from like a room with 3 optional ways, but like 2 doors. Now there are 4 paths, but they're in the center of the room. They're explicitly told as much. So this is very much, again, identical to the first game in a lot of respects, and I do think having the game the final game going in full circle, but with a different twist on top, is something to behold in terms of like output of like how people operate. This game even has a different name, Future Visions or something along those lines. The people in this game are shown visions of where they can go and be truliest and happiest, or, be in a really bad scenario. And to make matters worse than the first game is that dice are involved. The dice, when rolled, each color corresponding with one of their cardinal directions, so If they're in a corner room, they would get 2 dice. If they are in a room where there are 4 rooms to go to, then they get 4. So on and so forth. But the visions are the thing that is screwing up the players, because they assume that that means fucking anything. And it really fucking gets to them because it looks very realistic. You know, each one is even tailor-made to each individual player. That's definitely one of those things where it's, again, messing with your brain more so than any other game. Rather than a simple, layout game of the first game, that's very much it on that one. Here, it's not only just layout, but it is a form of deception stacked on top of it. It is deceiving the idea that if you go in certain directions, that you will get a positive or even neutral outcome, let's say. But again, if you go in a certain direction, then you'll get the quote-unquote bad life. And of course, the people begin to believe it, despite Aresu coming to the correct conclusion immediately and saying that not only that they should split up, unfortunately for them, they ended up splitting up in the wrong direction immediately, because they thought that they should check out the positive room first and the neutral room first, respectively, still having the split party. And due to this and the lack of communication getting stronger, with the desire of what they were seeing also getting stronger, led separations and even deaths to even occur in this type of game. You see, with each room, there is an additional penalty that can be given. So going in any given room alone is pretty stupid. But, you're getting all these cool visions of that cool future where you're super successful, so the temptation is so there. The cruel thing is that the solution was the negative direction. If you actually paid attention to the layout of where they're positioned in, and when you think about it in retrospective lens, the direction they needed to go in was south, west, which, interestingly enough, had more negative visuals at the start of the game. And I do think that that's the most intentional decision that this game makes. They immediately fucked up. Despite Arisu's solid strategy, it was a solid strategy in the wrong direction. This game could have ended substantially sooner if they had purely ignored the positive room and instead opted to split up in even further groups, like 2-2-2-2, and so on and so, because there were more players here than in the first game. They could have done that type of split and have it be utilized. But I digress. They didn't. They split up even further, again, sometimes splitting off into one, and that one, again, causing a death in a certain circumstance, and another happening at the same time later on. And so, the group has to reconfigure around these bundles of mistakes that have been made due to the deception working this time. The visuals working. Again, even Arisu's plan gets hindered by it. The prospect of the blue door is the positive door and has the positive visions, so maybe the exit... No, it wasn't. It never was that way. Again, the deception even tricked Arisu despite his plan being sound, or sound enough. And again, I do think that that maintains the level of strength of the writing in making him quite intelligent to figure out the strategy, but not smart enough to fully embrace the other aspects of the game on a more emotional level in terms of like figuring out the visual trick, as it were. And that is the final game, technically. And Arisu and a handful of other people win, with the baby counter coming in clutch, as I had already mentioned. Usagi essentially has 2 stacks of 15 on her possession, and much like before, she's able to utilize it in a room and save somebody and retrieve it back into the room that she is in. And that's what allows, except the 2 deaths that occur, for everyone else to get out. Arisu is stuck behind in one of the final room, whereas everybody else leaves. But a horrible wave of water leaps off, and eventually he gets out. He is then joined out by some of the other players, the ones that decided to stay, and after they die due to fucking around and finding out where they shouldn't have, he meets the true game master of the world. One might say he is death incarnate, played by a very popular actor. Iconic, even. So that was an interesting get. I'm not even going to say who it is, but I think if you've seen other videos, you probably already know, or if you don't, then check out the show. Figure out who that is at the end there. But this character represents death, and he gives Usagi a final game. He shows a handful of cards, and the Joker cards are face down, and he stacks up 2 cards and he says pick one. He flips it and it's a Joker, and Usagi immediately pans out that the other card is obviously another Joker. So he was able to catch on to Death's attempt at a trick here, but utilizes still a choice of life or death. Death is jumping toward the whirlpool and accepting it. Life, there is a clear path of land that he could just walk on. But when he's visually confronted with the idea that Usagi is still on the waterfall side, he jumps in that direction, and Death is quite impressed by this concept, that love can make people do crazy things, like in Hercules, unironically. And so he does save her, and are able to swim out just the 2 of them, and re-escape the Borderland once more. But Usagi, before he interestingly left, Death compiled a certain warning that the biggest game was yet to even come. And in fact, during the sort of wrap-up of a time skip of some sort, where the baby's born, I think, at this point, they're trying to figure out the baby's name, I think is the thing. But we cut to America, just like in Squid Game, and they're talking about something or other, and we cut or pan over to a character card named Alice. So, American spin-off? ? I mean, again, Squid Game already got there, but I'd be down to see that for myself. This is definitely a different concept, and again, dealing with more of a supernatural entity rather than, just directly competing. And, if you lose, you die. That's the only concept that has remained consistent between the two. And Squid Game does have a lot more to say about, like, the power structure of, like, the rich versus the poor and so on, because the people who are entered into the Squid Game are the ones who are in the lowest of the poverty. That's what the main character's whole shtick is. And here it's very much the same, where we get a low-life gamer, but it's in this near-death experience now, rather than being captured and being whisked away into a completely different world that sets Alice in Borderland apart. So obviously, the games can very much vary, and they have a solid, thing to follow. Each suit represent a different thing, and they can follow a very similar structure of the cards and have different groupings, now in America if they so choose. And again, I think I'd be down for that. Obviously, with it being in America and we're now following an Alice, the main character would likely be a female this time around. But I think outside of that obvious change, because of course it would be, I think what I would like to see are different games, and more so a different characterization of the waitress that we saw at the end of this trailer. Obviously, you want to set her apart from him in her attitude, her group of friends, all of this stuff. And maybe you can even have identical games and just have them pan out differently. Again, just because you copied something closely doesn't necessarily mean it's bad per se. Again, there are different iterations within each game that can be sort of utilized, and probably certain games that have yet to even be tackled, again, within the context of the Borderland. I'm sure there are a handful of things that creative people can think of there. And again, each suit has its own, style attached to it. Again, Hearts being the sort of deception type game. Clubs being team games, Spades being athletic games, and Diamonds being intelligent type games. Again, you could probably think of other games that have yet to be, tugged at here, where you can utilize there in this potential America version of Borderland. But yeah, I would definitely want to see different ways of getting to these character type moments and different levels of strategy, just to achieve something slightly different but still maintain the structure of the show. And that's about it for Alice in Borderland, all 3 seasons reviewed. I think this is a really solid show. This is easily like an 8, 9, or a 10 out of 10. I definitely wouldn't say a 10 out of 10. Again, the 3rd season definitely has one of the weaker moments of the whole forget thing section that happens in that season particularly. But I would definitely high-end this show in general. Again, either an 8 or a 9 out of 10. The character work is amazing. The game work is also... And they complement each other often through Arisu and Usagi respectively, and I do think that is a highlight of the show rather than a down butt of the show. So yeah, generally really strong stuff, and that is my review of Alice in Borderland. So if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One, to head to my petition about small YouTubers. Second, to my PayPal, you can help support me, my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server, you can join, collab, shield, do that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye.